Welcome, everyone. Hello, hello. This is Jerome Foundation's 2025 Application Questions Workshop for our film video production program. I want to let you know we're joining you today from both the homeland of the Dakota people, Minnesota Makoche, also called Minnesota, and current home of 11 tribes, 4 Dakota and 7 Anishinaabe, as well as the lands of the Lenape, Munsee, Canarsie, and many other tribes, what is also called New York City. We honor and respect the tribal sovereignty, the rights and cultural resilience of the many Native and Indigenous peoples connected to these lands. I'm Eleanor Savage. I'm the president of Jerome Foundation. I am pronoun flexible, and I'd like to invite my colleagues here to introduce yourselves.
Hey everybody, my name is TA. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a program officer based at the Jerome Foundation, and I'm located in the Twin Cities.
Hi, my name is Nell Augustin. I use she and they pronouns. I'm based in New York City, and I work as a program strategist at the Jerome Foundation.
I'm Andrea Brown. I use she, her pronouns. I'm based in the Twin Cities, and I'm the finance and operations manager at Jerome.
Wonderful. And I want to let you know if you have any access needs as we move through the webinar, please private chat Nell. All right, this session is also being recorded and we will post it to the website if you want to revisit it later. Today, we will focus on those application questions, which you can find in the PDF of the program and application guide, which is available for download on our website. And Andrea is sharing the links to the Minnesota and the New York City versions of those guides.
So just a reminder that kind of after we review the information today, we'll end our session with the Q&A. Your audio is muted, so to participate in the Q&A, please click on the Q&A box and type in your question. And if you'd like to ask your question anonymously, you can check that Send Anonymously box before you ask your question. And we'll get started. So in addition to your work samples and the full CV, the application for this program includes questions organized into sections based on the review criteria that panelists use to evaluate your application. For each question, there are suggested maximum lengths you should follow. This won't be enforced by Submittable. That's because we don't want you to have to rewrite things just to save a word here or there, but you are strongly suggested to operate within those recommendations. While Submittable saves your work as you go along, you might find it helpful to draft your responses first in Word, Pages, or Google Docs, and then copy paste them into Submittable. That way you can track your word count. In addition to the questions, you'll find further instruction below the text field in Submittable. Make sure to address all the details when responding to the questions. And there's one question where you have the option to respond either in writing or by uploading a video. That question is, how do you see your work as innovative, and or what creative risks are you taking to deepen and expand film or video forms? We provide the option of video there as an alternative to writing to allow you to respond in the medium in which you feel greatest comfort in conveying to the panel a sense of who you are.
So each element, from the application questions to your artist CV to the work samples, are linked to our review criteria of creative risk and vision, creative engagement and impact, and feasibility. And these are directly drawn from Jerome Foundation's practices and values. So every component of the application is your opportunity to speak to these criteria. The panel will also assess if there is an alignment between your filmmaking goals and how your work is being realized. So the definitions for these criteria are in our program and application guide beginning on page 10. And they're also discussed in the recorded program webinar. The link for that is on our website, and Andrea is sharing that with you in the chat. So you can take a deeper dive into those definitions. We provide the same criteria information to the panelists that we share with you. So everyone is working from the same definitions. There's no hidden criteria or agendas. And now we're going to walk through the questions.
All right, the first set of questions help the panel assess the creative risk and vision criteria. These questions ask what the story or content is about and how you will tell the story or structure the content. This is the kind of information you could include in a pitch session. Our advice from panelists is to be clear, concise, detailed, compelling, and persuasive. Don't generalize. Avoid overly complex explanations. Get to the heart of your story and speak authentically and from your own experience. Jerome does not have a preference around stories or themes. For story and structure, panelists want to know, what is your film about? This is answered by your logline and synopsis. Themes, Jerome has supported a broad range of themes from personal explorations around identity, grief, and self-discovery to social and political themes such as climate change or confronting oppression, to more existential or philosophical ideas around memory, leadership, or a moral dilemma. Creative vision is about how the film looks and feels. Artistic devices and creative approaches are the filmmaking techniques you will use to make your project. What cinematic visual effects or narrative structures will you use? Some filmmakers have asked the difference between vision and artistic devices. So the directorial vision of the film refers to the big picture around the film. For example, how you envision the story coming to life in terms of emotion, meaning, audience experience. What kind of visual world are you creating? Artistic techniques, on the other hand, are the specific methods and tools used to create your vision. So for example, let's say I'm making a film that's experimental about a young queer artist navigating family expectations and self-discovery. While the characters are fictional, they are deeply inspired by my community and real conversations I may have had. As both a writer and director, I would recognize my power in shaping their worlds and am committed to ensuring authenticity by collaborating with others who have shared these lived experiences. My vision would be to authentically explore identity, belonging, and resilience in the face of cultural and societal pressures. And at its core, the film would be about the intersection of queerness, working class family dynamics, and artistic self-expression, told through a deeply personal and emotionally nuanced lens. In this example, my artistic approach would be to use a cinema verite style cinematography to create gritty but intimate feeling, placing the audience in the character's emotional space. I would explore memory and self-reflection through a fragmented, non-chronological structure to mirror the character's evolving sense of identity. Sound would also be a critical element, including queer indie music and the integration of authentic community sounds, such as diegetic street noise, as well as family conversations, to root the film in lived experience. I would also plan to work with pacing through editing with a mix of lingering long shots, interspersed with rapid jump cut montages.
Question 2 asks why you and why this film? This is an important question. Please share your personal connection to the story, your unique perspective, and why you're the right person to tell it. A strong response should be authentic, reflective, and passionate. Why does this film matter to you? What are your personal experiences, cultural background, or lived realities that inspire you? How does your identity, background, or expertise shape the way you tell the story? What draws you to make this story? What viewpoint do you bring that others do not? And what larger themes or issues does this story explore? And how do these align with your artistic vision and values?
The third question asks you to share who the story is centered on and what is your relationship with them. What is your personal or professional relationship with the people or themes in the story? Have you ever worked within this community before? Do you have a shared lived experience? Are you an insider telling your own story or an outsider maybe telling someone else's? What privilege, access, or authority do you have in telling the story? And how are you ensuring ethical storytelling and avoiding extraction or exploitation? Are the people represented also involved in shaping how their stories will be told? These questions apply to all genres of filmmaking, not just documentary.
Question 4 is an invitation to share the artistic and cultural influences that shape your work. Think about your personal and artistic influences. What filmmakers, artists, writers, musicians, or movements have inspired you? Are there specific films or creative works that have shaped your perspective? Do you draw from personal experiences, cultural traditions, or historical events? You can also think about your creative lineage and communities. What artistic communities, mentors, or collaborators have influenced your practice? Do you see yourself carrying forward a tradition or breaking new ground? Do you engage with other artists through collectives, organizations, or specific movements? And you can think about your aesthetic and thematic focus. For example, are there recurring visual, sonic, or narrative styles in your work? Do you lean towards realism, abstraction, surrealism, or experimental techniques? What themes, emotions, or ideas do you return to in your films? Your answers to the questions help panelists understand the context for your work.
The fifth question encourages filmmakers to reflect on how they're pushing boundaries in their work and is essential for helping the panel understand your relationship to creative risk. We don't have a specific definition of risk, and we invite filmmakers to share how you see your work as taking risks. For those who choose to respond by video, they are encouraged to use a recording from their phone or web camera. Video answers are not artistic samples or a chance to include other work samples. We provide the option of video as an alternative. Hold on, just one moment. Sorry for the interruption. We provide an option of video as an alternative to writing. I'm so sorry. Hi, honey. As an alternative to writing and allow you to respond to the medium in which you feel greatest comfort in conveying to the panel a sense of who you are. On page 11 of the program of the application guide, you'll find examples of the ways that funded filmmakers have defined creative risk. Some of the ideas to consider include, but are not limited to, experimentation with form and structure. Are you challenging traditional storytelling methods such as nonlinear narratives, mixed media, or interactive elements? Are you blending genres or hybridizing documentary, fiction, or experimental techniques? Are you working with unconventional pacing, framing, or editing styles? Another thing to consider is innovation in technical or visual approaches. Are you using emerging technologies such as VR, AR, AI, or 360-degree filmmaking? Are you embracing unconventional cinematography, lighting, or sound design? Are you exploring new ways to represent identity, memory, or lived experiences visually? Next, rethinking industry norms or storytelling ethics. Are you disrupting dominant perspectives by centering underrepresented voices? Are you experimenting with collaborative, non-hierarchical filmmaking models? Are you challenging extractive storytelling practices by prioritizing ethical, community-driven approaches?
This next question asks you to share who your target audience is for the film, the intended reach, and your ideas for how to get your work to your audience. So this asks, you to share how you define your audience. Who do you envision watching this film? Is it the general public, specific communities, activists, policymakers, academics, artists, other artists, etc.? Are you aiming for a niche audience, such as, the LGBTQ plus youth, immigrant communities, climate activists, or a much broader audience? And how does your film speak to the audience experiences, interests, or concerns? How are you planning for engagement beyond the film? Are you partnering with grassroots organizations, community groups, educational programming, workshops, panel discussions, interactive storytelling, etc., or collaborating with other activists, scholars, or institutions to provide engagement related to the film's themes?
Question 7 asks why now is the right time to tell this story. You might consider the timeliness and relevance of your project in terms of how your film responds to or engages with pressing issues. What current social, political, cultural, or artistic movements make this film particularly urgent? Is there a historical or anniversary milestone that adds significance? You can also think in terms of personal readiness and growth. Is this a project you are undertaking due to the evolution of your skills? How have your experiences, skills, or artistic vision evolved to make this the right project for you right now? Or you can think about industry and audience factors. Is there an increased audience demand or a shift in cultural conversations that make this story more resonant?
This next question asks about your strengths and challenges. Panelists want to hear candidly what your strengths are, and equally important, what areas or skills need more development, practice, or education around. Panels respond strongly to honesty. Because of our value around creative risk and our focus on early career filmmakers, there is a deep appreciation for your reflections on areas of growth and the challenges you face. A well-rounded response should demonstrate self-awareness, ambition, and a commitment and plan for growth. Think about how your response to this question aligns with what the panelists experience in your work samples.
All right, number 9. This question is essential for communicating your approach to ethical storytelling and is responsible for filmmaking practices. Consider the key practices and systems that address participant or community consent and feedback throughout the filmmaking process. For example, are you clearly communicating the purpose, scope, and potential impact of the film to all participants before filming begins? Are you engaging community members in shaping the narratives to ensure that their perspectives are represented authentically? Are you using transparent agreements that outline participants' rights, including how their likeness, image, voice, or story may be used? Are you working with community advisors or cultural consultants to ensure respectful and accurate representation? Are you willing to adjust the storytelling approach based on participant feedback and other ethical considerations? Are you offering participants an opportunity to review and provide feedback on their portrayal before the film is finalized and released? For filmmakers who do not focus on specific people or communities, these principles can still apply in developing content that is mindful of its broader social and cultural impact. Engaging with artistic peers, audiences, and ethical frameworks ensures a responsible and thoughtful approach to storytelling.
So these next set of questions move to the feasibility review criteria. Your responses to these questions demonstrate the thought, planning, and development that you've put into your film project. The panel wants to understand whether your creative team, the timeline, budget, and fundraising plan can in all probability move this film project forward.
All right, this question focuses on your budget and fundraising plan. So budgets of any size are eligible for support. You can request up to $30K in funding from Jerome. The budgets for funded projects in recent rounds have ranged from $18,000 to $2 million. We provide a budget template that you may use. You may also use your own, as long as it includes the categories of information referred to in the budget template from Jerome. We have an in-depth webinar that you can watch on how to create a film budget, and Andrew will drop a link into the chat if you want to check that out. So some questions to consider are, in terms of fundraising for the film, how much funding has already been secured, what has been requested or applied to but not yet secured, and how much is there remaining to be raised. We recognize that some film budgets are larger than 30K, and we ask all applicants to identify secured and potential sources of income. And individual donors or supporters do not need to be specifically named, but you can include the funding in a generic way, such as individual A or donor A. At the same time, panels are charged with investing grant funds in films that are likely to move forward. Providing a list of other secured and/or potential funders gives the panel an indication of how realistic your planning has been so far and how likely the plan of the film is to move forward.
This question about the budget side of your past projects helps the panel understand your experience in fundraising for your projects. If your largest budget has been $50,000 and you are proposing, let's say, a project with a $1 million budget, the panel will have questions about how you plan to go about raising this significant level of funding. So it's important for you to share your plan for what you'll do if you don't raise the full amount, and share your planning and addressing this question for the panel. So for example, will you scale back from the project? Will it shift it from a feature to a short? Will you change some locations for the shoot, etc.?
This next question asks about your distribution plan. So where are you intending to show your film, and how do you want to get your work out into your community? So questions that you're being asked are, how are you planning engagement beyond the production of the film? How and are you partnering with grassroots organizations, community groups, educational programming, workshops, panel discussions, interactive storytelling, for example? And are you planning exhibition or distribution via film festivals, streaming platforms, community screenings, museum exhibitions, public installations, social media campaigns, etc.? You will be asked if you're working on an impact campaign. Are you collaborating with activists, movement leaders, scholars, institutions to drive engagement with the film's themes?
This question gives you the opportunity to share with the panel information that might not be explained by your work samples and CV. So for example, if this is a shift into a new film genre, you can share here with the panel the information about why you're making this change and what pulled you to move in this direction.
So next is the question, is there anything that we haven't asked you? And you can feel free to share your comments here. We strongly urge you to not necessarily talk about need. Need is not a criterion that we use to evaluate applications. And so we know we've shared lots of information with you now, and we are going to invite your questions in the Q&A.
And before we get there, I just want to let you know about some additional resources that we want to make sure that you know about. Full information about all of them is in the Minnesota and New York City program and application guides. So there's an informational webinar for the New York City film production program, and then a separate webinar for the Minnesota film production and filmmaker mentorship programs. There are also sessions specifically about creating work samples and creating your filmmaker CV and creating a film budget for this and other grant programs. All those recordings are posted to our website. Just go to the page for the specific program that you're interested in. And if you have questions about eligibility, general questions about the program, we encourage you to make a phone call appointment with program staff. You can sign up for a time between now and March 28th, or you can send your questions by email. Just check out the help and resources section for each program. And as a final reminder, applications are due before 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Central Time on Thursday, April 3rd. Late applications will not be accepted and incomplete applications will not be considered. Once applications are submitted and the deadline closes, they may not be edited or updated. And in order to troubleshoot any potential issues that might come up, your internet goes out or slow upload times, things like that, please try to submit your application in advance of that deadline. And as a reminder, to ask your questions now, you can click on the Q&A box and type in your question. And remember to check the send anonymously box before you ask your question if you do want it to remain anonymous. And we'll get going and start responding to your questions now.
We have a question here. I am based in New York, and can I shoot my film internationally? Also, can you submit more than one project? You can film anywhere as long as you are a resident of either the 5 boroughs of New York City or Minnesota. To address the second part of this question, you cannot submit more than one application or one project. Let's see. My basic eligibility question is whether I can apply for the grant as a second-time director. When in my first feature film, I was named on IMDb and the film credits as the film's producer and writer, as well as lead actor. I was on set there almost all filming days to coordinate with the location, contact, rehearse with the cast, supervise, etc. Work with the director on how each cast member should say and act out his or her lines. I thus considered myself as a sort of unofficial second or assistant director on the set. Who wants to take that question? Now.
Sure, I'm happy to. So the reason why we require credits is so that you are not working on your first feature and that you're really ready to continue your directorial kind of craft. So it seems that you would probably be ineligible, but if you have questions, you could set up a call with myself or TA. But we do require that you are credited as the director because credits are taken quite seriously. Thanks.
Are personal projects eligible to apply? Yes. I mean, we support all genres of filmmaking and a whole range of kind of content and subject matter and areas of focus. So it can be intensely personal or any variation. um,
This next question is, can we apply for a short as well as a feature film? And there I would say that both shorts and features are eligible for funding. But again, like we said, you can only submit one application. So you're picking a project to apply with, but that project can be a short or a feature.
I'm next. Oops. Question disappeared. What is your advice for how to submit a strong application when production has just begun and only a small amount of footage has been shot so far to use for the work sample? So one of the options that you have for work samples is to submit a work in progress of the actual film project that you're working on. But you're required to submit 2 work samples, and those are not the project that you're working on. So it's okay if you don't have a work sample of the project. This is a production grant. It's designed to help you support the production of the film. Is there anything else we should say about work samples?
Are you gonna go? I feel like we're both going for the
I would say there's a whole
Yeah.
webinar about work samples and how you might think about selecting your work samples, what context you might want to provide when you are selecting your work samples. So I'd encourage you to check that out.
Here's a question about, I've only made short films, but when I tried to submit for eligibility, it looks like I need to be a feature filmmaker. Is that correct? No, this program supports any length, short or feature. So if you are having trouble with eligibility, it must be related to some other factor, and I would encourage signing up for an eligibility call with either TA or Nell to talk that through. If this grant could potentially cover the whole estimated production budget, would we be ineligible to receive other grants that we are applying for? I'm not exactly sure what that's asking for, but if you apply to the Jerome Foundation and the $30,000 grant would cover your entire production budget, you would still be eligible to receive that funding. We support all levels of filmmaking from, as we said, we've supported budgets that were $18,000 up to, $2 million. So if the funding that we have would cover your budget, you're still eligible to apply, even if it's a small scale project.
And I'd also note that some, it can also be the fact that Jerome is sort of the first funder in, and filmmakers in the past have sort of leveraged that fact to go and raise additional funds. So you're not like stuck to, the initial scope or scale that you may have proposed. If you find yourself, that you're able to fundraise more and perhaps expand on your project as it goes along.
Mm-hmm. I want to jump over to the chat to pick up a couple of questions here. Can you still be eligible if you previously directed a short or only a feature film? You're eligible as long as you have the 2 required work samples. And there's no preference that it be a short or a feature. But if you have 2 or more feature films, then you're kind of beyond our early career frame, and you would not be eligible. And then also, how firm is the rule that your previous work samples cannot be made while you were a student? If films were made in the course of a graduate school program but are not connected to the school and had a professional life outside of the program, can exceptions be considered? The rule around the work samples created while you were a student are firm. So even if it's just very hard for the panel to parse that, but there's a difference here depending on Minnesota, whether you're in Minnesota or New York. TA or Nell, can you address that? And while you're looking that up, we can answer another question here. Can the film be for a play? So if you're a theater artist and you want to make a film of a play, and you don't have experience as a filmmaker beyond that, then you would not be eligible. But and it has to be your work. So you can't be making a film for someone else. But if you have the experience and the work samples to apply, let's say you're a filmmaker who works in film as well as theater or other fields. As long as you meet our early career eligibility and other eligibility, you could apply. Do you want to talk to the work samples requirements, TA or Nell?
What were you looking into? I actually missed that question, so I don't know now if you want to just answer.
We can circle back at some point if the 2 of you could look up and one of you share New York, one of you maybe share the Minnesota requirements. That would be great. Under detailed budget, can you upload a PDF or other supporting format? Yes. You don't have to use Jerome's template. You can upload your own template. We just ask that you make sure that the details we ask for in the template are covered by whatever you are uploading.
And generally a PDF format is going to be the best. That way you can ensure that what you're seeing is the same thing that the panelists are going to see. Things aren't going to get cut off strangely there.
Would 2 short films credited as director satisfy eligibility? Yes, as long as you are the director and have creative control over the projects and have work samples from those to provide, that would satisfy eligibility. As long as they're not created while you're in a degree program or there's other information in the guidelines about what kinds of work samples are not eligible. So if it was, something that was commissioned commercially, that wouldn't be eligible. Music videos are not eligible, things like that. So do check out the full eligibility information.
I can answer the work sample question. Sorry, I was trying to follow the chat and I had totally need a reminder. But the question was, what are the work sample eligibility requirements for Minnesota and New York? For New York, it's pretty straightforward. You'll need 2 completed and screened film projects that you were the sole director for, and if you were applying as a co-applicant, that you were both the co-directors for. For Minnesota, so you do need 2 completed film projects, but it's a little bit different. One needs to be a non-student work. It needs to have been you as the sole director. Same thing applies if you're the co-director, co-directed together, and publicly shared, screened. The second work sample doesn't necessarily have to have been publicly screened. It could have been not screened at all or not yet. It could have been self-presented, and it could be student work if it overlapped with if it was, yeah, overlapped with you in a degree program, was created while you were in school, that's acceptable. Of course, we'd also accept a work sample that was, hits the other criteria of being outside of school and publicly screened and completed. So just both need to be completed for both geographies, but yeah.
The
That's helpful.
requirements for New York are different than Minnesota.
Correct. Yep.
And the reason for that is because of the radical difference between the 2 geographic areas. And Nell has dropped in to the chat the Minnesota production work sample requirements.
Yeah, just for us.
Okay. Just for us.
So the application guides for each program, it's confusing when we're talking about it because we've got Minnesota folks and New York City folks all on the same session here. But if you look at the Minnesota specific materials or the New York specific materials as they apply, it should make more sense and be a little less confusing than us trying to swirl it all together. So I think that's our first tip for eligibility. And then, if you have questions, I'm seeing some things in here that are kind of specific to you and your personal experiences. That's when we advise making that phone appointment with TA and Nell, where you'll be asked to, upload your current CV or resume, and that'll just help you kind of talk in person through your experiences and kind of timeline of work to make sure that you're eligible. And we do all that to make sure that you don't, go into an application thinking that you're eligible, spending time on it, answering all these questions, only to find out that you're not eligible for the program. So that's why we have the emphasis on that. Although this session is a little bit more about the application questions, we do have resources about eligibility elsewhere.
Yeah, the other webinar that's uploaded on our website, that is the program webinar, we go through all of the eligibility requirements and very specifically address those if you're looking for that. And maybe, Andrea, could you repost that link in the chat here? Here's a question about if this would be my first feature film, but I've done several shorts before. Am I eligible? Yes. Yes, as long as you don't have more than 2 feature films, you're eligible. And as long as you have enough work samples to meet the work sample requirements, you would be eligible. Films I made in film school or weekend festivals acceptable. No, I think we've answered that. But please take a look in the application, in the program and application guide. There's a whole list of ineligible work samples there. If you have a fiscal sponsor, can the grant go through the fiscal sponsor? No, this is an individual artist grant and it goes directly to the filmmaker. Or if you have a single member LLC, it can go to a single member LLC.
Another question here is, do you expect to have a finished script for the application?
I can answer this one. So if you are a director and your film is a narrative film, or a hybrid, but has narrative, kind of the narrative genre in that, we do require a finished script for the proposed film project for the grant. If you are not a narrative director, we welcome. You can upload optional materials, including a script, or if that's what you have and you'd like to include that, we welcome that, but that's not required for non-narrative directors. Eleanor, is there anything else to that question that I missed?
I would just expand that if you are a narrative director and you don't, and scripting is not the way that you work, if you work more improvisationally, you can, just let the panel know that, and you can substitute either an outline or whatever you work with, for quote unquote scripting, if you're working in a non-traditional way. And that would be a good thing if you just call TA or Nell, and they can kind of talk to you about what acceptable options would be, just to make sure. Let's see, I'm a filmmaker, but I've been focusing on computer graphics and visual effects. As a result, most of my work at the moment is not film related or directly involved in filmmaking. What type of work is allowed to be shown to the panel as proof of ability and knowledge? I can take that. You do need film work samples in order to apply. So if you don't have those work samples, you would not be able to apply. Can I use the grant for a play that I wrote and want to film? Potentially. If you have filmmaking experience, if you have the experience and the work samples to be eligible. So whether it's a script or a film script or a play or something more, even a different form, as long as you are meet all the other eligibility, that would be eligible. Do I need to submit proof of residency? We do require people to be residents for at least a year in Minnesota or the 5 boroughs of New York City to be eligible. And that eligibility is defined as you're a resident for, I think it's 180, what's it, 85?
183.
183 days, which is the definition of residency. We don't, we work mostly on the honor system. If there is a question that comes up through the application materials, we'll reach out to you to further explore. And before doing the award, we actually do kind of research to confirm and ask you to confirm your residency. My co-director and I have directed one film together, but while I have completed other film projects, she has not. Is it okay if we include a work sample, which is not just mine, in addition to the shared piece? Nell or TA, do you want to answer that?
I can take this. So unfortunately, the requirements for co-directors are the same for individual applicants. So in this case, it sounds like you would be ineligible as a team. Again, happy to review your CV or schedule a call, but it sounds like you might be too early right now together as a team.
Do the 2 work samples have to be a minimum of 10 minutes each or collectively?
I can take this one. So the required 2 work samples need to total together 10 minutes. So you could designate the panel to watch 5 minutes of film one, and then 5 minutes of film two, or you can kind of chop up the math in whatever way, 6 and 4, 7 and 3, etc. If you have for your proposed film, you can provide that work in progress if you've shot any footage, and that can be up to 3 minutes. So in total, you could technically submit 13 minutes total, but 10 minutes of that must be from your 2 film work samples, and the 3 minutes is for your proposed film if you have any footage.
Do music videos count as a work sample? No, that is one of the ineligible samples. Can the funds go towards creating a pilot episode and/or a documentary and not a short or a narrative feature?
I can try to take a stab at this. We don't support episodic work. I'm not sure if you're
We
talking
do,
about maybe.
we actually do
Oh,
support
okay.
episodic work. But so you could use it to support an episode, as well as a documentary, short, or a narrative. Are there examples of marketing distribution plans that could be used as a template for our own? We don't currently have examples of marketing or distribution plans. You know, the people's applications are private information, and so we don't have permission to publicly share other people's applications. But Nell, are there resources you would recommend for kind of finding good examples of that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's tough because every film is different.
Mhm.
There are some free tools for distribution, whether or not it's depending on the genre that I could try to point you to. If you want to schedule a call with me, I could maybe try to lead you in the right direction. It's hard to say right now via chat.
Does being a senior affect consideration as an early career filmmaker? No, if we define early career as between 2 to 10 years, generating your own original work. So if you are a senior, you are within that 2 to 10 year frame that you've just started filmmaking, you can still be an early career filmmaker. Age is not a consideration, except that you have to be at least 18. And let's see, we've funded a filmmaker. I think the oldest filmmaker that we've funded as an early career filmmaker was 85, I think, at the time.
And then I think the youngest was 18. So
yeah, full
there's a
gamut.
range.
Yeah. What is not covered under cost? In terms of the budget, we have a very detailed budget webinar that I would encourage you to give a listen to. Also, we do share in the program and application guide details about what you can't include. I think one of the most important things to note is that because this is a production grant, at least 50% of the budget needs to be focused on production. So if you are, still working on pre-production, or you're looking for funding for post or distribution, you can include some of those costs, but at least half of the budget needs to be for production. I adapted my own play into a short film, produced it, but was under someone else's direction and went on to have network success. That couldn't be a work sample. Who wants to take that? I can respond. So if it sounds like it was directed by someone else, so not your work as a director, that would not be an eligible sample. So what the panel needs to see, because this is a grant for filmmakers to make their own films, we need to see work samples that demonstrate your work as a director. So you have to have work that you have directed and had total creative control over. We have some more in chat. No, did we already cover that?
Yeah, I think so. And I would say that if you have questions about like work samples and what public presentation might mean, or kind of in school versus out of school, I'd recommend that you check out the work sample webinar, which goes into detail on that and also delineates, what are the requirements for Minnesota as opposed to the requirements for New York City. One question I'm seeing here is, how many submissions does the grant typically get on any given cycle? And so for the New York program, we receive on average between 200 and 220 applications per cycle. For the Minnesota program, it ranges on average closer to 30 per cycle.
I think that there's a question about what are you looking for in a clear story structure, and that is hard to answer because it depends somewhat on what form are you working in. If you're working in narrative form, you want to kind of clearly establish the world and the characters. Talk about the goals and the stakes. How you are structuring the story. Is it linear, nonlinear? What's the character arc? What are the emotional core? There's just so many different pieces to what can go into the structure. If you're working on an experimental, non-narrative, abstract work, that would have a whole different set of things to talk about. So if you want help, I would suggest contacting TA or Nell directly to kind of talk through what specifically you're doing and if any suggestions that we might have to share with you. Does an online screening publication qualify as publicly screened for New York? For online screening, it has to be something that is either curated, juried, or programmed. So it can't be one of the kind of screenings of open call or first come, first serve, or just upload anything. It has to be something that is intentionally curated. But if it is, then that could qualify as publicly screened. For New York City, for co-director, if one of us was in a graduate program when we made the film, but the other wasn't, question mark. Also, when we began the film, before she entered the program.
I can try. Yeah, I think if the film was completed while your co-director was still enrolled as a student, I would say this film project would not be eligible as a work sample for this application. For every eligibility, I think criteria, both co-directors need to hit that. So yeah, one can't be in school during the time of the project.
If I'm a resident of 2 states, one of which is New York, am I eligible? So you have to be a resident of New York City, one of the 5 boroughs of New York City, not just New York State. So I'm not sure. But if you are a legal resident of one of the 5 boroughs of New York City, so you're living there at least 183 days and have been for a year prior to application, then you're likely eligible. No, you would be eligible if you meet those criteria. Is a completed script required for a narrative proposal, whether short or feature? Or would a treatment also work? So for a narrative proposal, we do ask for a completed script, whether it's a short or a feature. If we'll have to, I would ask TA or Nell if you can pull up the language for this. So if you don't have a completed script, if you have a draft, we accept, drafts, especially if the part that you include as your work sample is in the draft. The panel definitely needs to understand how you're scripting in some sense of the whole of that.
I can jump in and read that language if you want, Eleanor. Okay.
That'd be great.
So a script for the proposed film, ideally in a PDF format, is required for narrative films, as was said earlier, and hybrid films with a narrative focus. It goes on to say, if you are working in narrative, etc., around improvisation, we said this. You are strongly encouraged to make sure that one of your work samples was developed if you're applying with an improvised process, that your work sample reflects that. If you're still in the storyboarding phase or are a film director who works from a finished script and you don't have a script for this project, the panel will not have enough information to consider your proposal and you should not apply in this round. If you have a draft, that is helpful, but ideally we're looking for a completed work. It goes on and says a storyboard, outline, lookbook, visual concept in PDF may be uploaded for films in any genre, but is not required. This helps the panelists gauge how you are developing the project, characters, structure, rhythm, visual concept. Artists working in narrative or hybrid films with a narrative focus should note that this is an additional option, but cannot be a substitute for the script, as noted above. Hopefully that helps.
Let's see, I think we're at time, but I can quickly try to answer these last questions. Do you recommend submitting work samples that match the proposed project? Or is it okay if it's a different style or genre? So you can show a range of work, but if you definitely want to kind of confirm for the panel that whatever you're proposing as the style and genre for the film project, that you have the kind of chops to make that. So here's a good example. We had an artist apply that was proposing integrating animation into their documentary work. And they didn't have any evidence in their CV or in their work samples that they had the skills to do animation. So the panel just had too many questions about whether that was even possible. And that wasn't a successful application. So you definitely want to think about that and be able to communicate that you can do what it is that you're proposing. Can I submit a film where I am the lead director and creator, but because of the genre, there will be more than one director on the project? No, essentially, if you are applying with a co-director, the co-director has to meet all of the eligibility requirements, and then you have to have the work samples as co-directors to meet the eligibility for application. This would be my first time directing, but I've been a producer for 15 years. Can I submit work that I've produced? No, unfortunately, you have to have work as a director. I think we can answer, TNL, can you help me with answering some of these questions that we have left remaining, because we are at time. We appreciate all of you for joining us. I think we've had a lot of questions about eligibility here. We highly encourage you to listen to the eligibility webinar that we did previously. A lot of these questions are answered there. And also know that you have the option to sign up for an eligibility appointment and have your questions answered there. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We want to be supportive. Thank you all for joining us. Andrea, over to you.
Yeah, I'd just like to express our appreciation of everybody showing up today and asking questions. And if we didn't get to your question, or if you have follow-up questions, again, we're here to support you through this process. You can go to the program pages where you'll find information to contact Nell and TA by email, or if you would like to set up a phone appointment, all of that. So please reach out to us, let us know, and remember that the application deadline is Thursday, April 3rd. We'll also send the recording out of this session to everybody who signed up for it, and we'll post it to our website in the coming days as well.
How are we doing on these questions? Almost there.
And again, I'd just encourage you to read through the eligibility where we, kind of talk about how careers aren't necessarily linear, especially given our world today. And so it might be useful for you to have a conversation with TNL just to kind of walk through your timeline of your career and see if you're eligible and see what might count as sort of years in your career. Those are all things that are kind of better answered in a private one-on-one discussion. So we'd encourage you to make that appointment.
Mm-hmm. And, one of the things I want to just say related to this question around, the impact of COVID and the industry shutdown. you know, in the last round of this program, we had over 200 applications in New York, and you know, I don't know the details. I can't remember off the top of my head for Minnesota, but we only have the funding to support about 5% of the total applications provided. And so I understand the frustration with that, but there is a huge need for funding for making independent film, and we hope more funders will join us in doing that. Just wanted to acknowledge, we understand the frustration. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.